Q&A number 7. The first question I got was, have you ever produced a professional score just using orchestral samples as opposed to recording an orchestra? Is this acceptable for smaller budget productions? Yes. I mean, how else would you do it? If they want an orchestra and they don't have the budget for an orchestra, then that's just how it's going to be. That's also why it's so important to get your mock-ups to a level where you can at least fool the average audience into thinking that this is an orchestra. What I will always do is get at least one soloist, get at least someone to sweeten the mock-ups, especially in the more exposed sections of the score. It always makes a difference, I think. Question number 2. Do you ask other composers for help, or did you when you started? For example, how to solve your arrangement problems, or do you ask others for feedback before orchestration or recording? No. First of all, the only people you need to please are the filmmakers anyway, so it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks or whatever their feedback is. The only feedback that you need to be concerned about is the filmmaker's feedback. But also it would be kind of an NDA violation to play stuff, unpublished stuff that you don't own, by the way, to a third party. I mean, sure, if it's someone you trust, it's probably fine, but you would, in order for them to help you, they would also have to watch the movie, know the briefing, because it's not about the arrangement or orchestration or anything, or the writing. It's about how does it work with the picture. And so they would have to know all the background information in order to judge that. I will certainly ask my orchestrator about orchestration stuff when he's involved on my projects. I will ask like, hey, I'm looking for this kind of sound. How can we achieve that? So that will certainly happen. I will also communicate with any mix engineer or recording engineer, kind of in the same vein, like, hey, I'm looking for this kind of sound. Do you know how we can accomplish that? So I will kind of defer to their expertise whenever that is necessary, for sure. And I will ask questions and learn from them. But that would be from people who are on the project already. So this doesn't usually extend to people outside of the project. What I will do and have done in the past is, if I know one of my friends and colleagues is really good at comedy, for example, and I'm about to score a comedy, I might ask them if they could send me their best comedy cues and kind of point me to movies that they think is really great comedy, or, you know, film scores that they think is great comedy in that particular realm. So I will ask for recommendations to kind of immerse myself in a style that maybe I'm not as familiar with as with other styles. And I will do the same for them. And sometimes during the theme writing process at the very beginning, what I will do is I will just isolate the melody and send it to a bunch of people that I know a lot of film scores and just ask them, does this sound familiar? Because sometimes when I write something, I have this moment of, does this already exist? And then I will take it and kind of just send the raw idea to people and just go, have you heard this before? And, usually it comes back with, no, it sounds familiar because it's so logical, but I have not actually heard this before. So that I can kind of, in good conscience, continue writing. But that's kind of the extent to which I will ask for help. Anything else would have to be from people who are already on the production. Next question. What percentage of your work time goes into actual writing, composing, scoring, and are you happy with that percentage? If we're counting mock-ups into the composing process, since they are inevitably linked, I'd say probably 60 to 75% of my time goes into writing. But it really depends on the project. And then I would say about 25% of my time I'm basically doing the day-to-day business stuff, management stuff, meetings, pitches, all the other stuff that you kind of have to do, attending events, whatever it is, really. It also really depends on my team, to be honest, because if I'm working with new people, there will inevitably be more time spent with management. with explaining things and kind of, getting everybody on the same page. Whereas if I'm working with my usual team, people I've already done a lot of productions with, that usually means there's a well-oiled machine and, we're all on the same page already. They don't need a lot of instruction. They already know what's up and what I want. And, there doesn't have to be a ton of communication or management or supervision, which is why a lot of people prefer to keep working with the same people, because every time you add someone new, it adds to the management portion of the job. Next question. If you had to do it all over again, would you assist under another composer? How long would you stay there before going out on your own, or would you fly solo and make your film scoring career that way? What are the benefits to each? That's a really tricky question. Because either way, it's a gamble. It's a gamble no matter what. I didn't really have a choice in the matter because I needed the income and I needed a visa sponsor. So I didn't really have a lot of choice in the matter, to be honest. My options were very limited by my financial means and my immigration status, pretty much. If money wasn't something that I had been concerned with at the time, and immigration hadn't been, such a drag, then yeah, maybe I would have assisted a little less. And I would have focused a little more on building up my own relationships sooner and kind of going out on my own sooner. There is, of course, the advantage of learning under someone who's more experienced, learning all the ropes, all the processes that you can't really figure out by yourself. Someone has to teach you that. So I wouldn't really want to miss that. But you can learn that within probably 2 years, 3 years, something like that. Because likewise, being an assistant is so time-consuming and so it's a full-time thing, and so you don't have a lot of time left over on the side to build up your own career. And that's kind of something that I regret. I've done that a little bit, as much as I could, but assisting other people kind of took up all of my time most of the time, and I just did not have a lot of time left over and a lot of energy left over, to be frank, to, foster my own relationships. I spent a lot of time, making other people's career happen instead of making my career happen. But I do think I got out at the right time. I assisted for around 3.5 years, and then I went freelance. I still assisted to supplement my income, but, over, in my 4th year, I started to get a lot more selective about who I was working with and what I was doing. And then around 4.5, 5 years in, I could just be my own composer and I did not need to do any more assistant tasks whatsoever. I definitely would not recommend getting stuck in that position. There are a lot of people who are now in the 6th year or 10th year or even more. That's a long time to be assisting. Unless you're really sure your boss is, one of the good ones that's going to help you out and do a co-write with you and really give you a leg up along the way, I would probably get out sooner. Because most people don't do that. Most composers will not help you out. And then you kind of get stuck for a whole decade in that position and you kind of don't have an exit strategy. So I might still do it, but I definitely would have more of an exit strategy right from the start. I would be very clear on what I want to get out of this, and then I would already plan from the start when I'm going to exit that position, and I would probably start sooner fostering my own career. And the last question for this one: when approaching composers for positions as assistants, what's the most sought after skill to have, and how best to contact a composer in the right way so you're more likely to hear back? That entirely depends on the composer and what kind of music they write. For some people, mock-ups, like orchestral mock-ups, might be the golden skill. For others, it's synth programming or band stuff or songwriting or, whatever. That really depends on the composer you would work for. Others would probably prefer Pro Tools work or admin work or really anything they don't want to do, but that's a very personal thing, It really depends on what they don't want to do and what they don't have time to do. You know, there are composers, the first thing they would hand off is mock-ups, and then there are other composers that would never ever hand off mock-ups. So it's really very, you know, a case-by-case scenario. As far as reaching out goes, that's kind of a tricky question, because everyone receives like a million requests every week of, you know, people just asking for work. What I do find is that well over, 70% or so of the people reaching out do so in a way that is definitely an instant no. First thing they do, for example, at least 50% of people misspell my name. I know it's not an easy name, but it's right there in front of you. No matter what platform you're reaching out, it's right there in front of you. You can just copy paste it. It just shows, you know, people didn't like proofread their stuff. Or I've gotten resumes where there was an entirely different name in the cover letter because they sent the same cover letter to different people, but then didn't make sure that they adjusted the materials for each application. You know, that's kind of a bad oversight. Sometimes there's like a lot of typos in emails, and I'm just like, come on, just proofread it before you send it off. Other people will start their message immediately with, oh, sorry about my bad English. And I'm like, well, it's not like there's not a solution to that. You could have asked someone to proofread it for you. We live in times where we all have access to someone who speaks English very well. So there wasn't really a reason to send off a really faulty email. You should have just taken a moment to have someone proofread it to make a good first impression. If that's already too much work, if they can't be bothered to do that, then, you know, why should composers bother replying to that? That would be my question. Others don't bother introducing themselves. They just jump the gun right to the give me work part. And I'm like, well, I don't know who you are. Could you maybe just give me a couple sentences of who you are? I also get a few that are definitely inappropriate. You know, people mentioning like my looks or something where it's just like, no, you don't do that in a job application. That's absolutely inappropriate. You generally don't do that with strangers, period. Like, don't assume you get to judge someone else's appearance, whether it's a compliment or not. But anyway, that's not the point here. Others send me music, but no qualifications whatsoever. And then the music is also not at all what I do. So I'm just like, what am I supposed to do with this? This is not at all the kind of music I write. It's like, at least you should treat an email introduction like you would treat a cover letter. Make an effort. Make a basic effort to have a structure, to introduce yourself, to say what you want to offer, say what you want. So many people just write the absolute most informal messages where I'm just like, that's not appropriate for any type of job application. Just because we work in entertainment doesn't mean that there is not etiquette. There is. I would generally not recommend sliding into people's DMs on their private social media accounts. That's generally not the best idea. It can work sometimes, but if they have official channels like a website and stuff, I would probably reach out through that. What also happens quite a bit is just random people that I don't know tagging me because they just published a piece on social media and they just tag me along with like 80 other people. And I'm just like, why would you do that? Don't do that. Others have asked for work in YouTube comments, but they use like a fake name and they, you know, don't actually say what they can do or have done or anything. And I'm just like, that's so unprofessional. Why would you ask someone for work in YouTube comments when they don't even have a way to contact you and you're not leaving any crucial information whatsoever that would make them want to work with you? I don't know. I don't really understand that part. And at the end of the day, if you don't come in with some kind of recommendation, it's very tricky. Or with something to show for yourself, some skill or some previous work, you know, something that you can show. Then it's just unlikely you'll be picked out of the sea of people that are applying every single day. A much better way to go is by just creating your own stuff and putting it out there and just waiting for people to notice you. The right people to notice you. Most people I've hired either came recommended by other people I trust, or I literally found them online. I saw stuff that they made and I was like, that's exactly the thing I'm gonna need right now. Their stuff just kept popping up on my social media and in my YouTube recommendations and everywhere, and eventually I did listen, and when I needed them, I just gave them a call or wrote them an email. So I would be the one reaching out to them and go, hey, I've heard a bunch of your stuff and I think it's really good and I think it would really fit this project I have coming up. Do you want to join the team? So they never even asked me for work. And let me give you some examples. Like, I worked with Christopher Siu. You probably also follow his YouTube channel that he built up from scratch. And I saw him, I was printing stems, and, you know, as you do, you're watching YouTube or doing other stuff on the side while Cubase is rendering stuff. And I saw this roundtable with other composers, and I really liked his personality and went to his YouTube channel, listened to some of his music, and was like, hey, I should reach out to him. He's really good. Another person, David Kudell, I started working with him last year. You might think I hired him because he won the Spitfire competition. That was actually not how we first met. We first met during the Orchestral Tools roundtables where he was making the videos. He's still making videos for them. And I was completely unaware of him at the time. Then he won the Spitfire competition. There was all this fallout. People were attacking him. And then I reached out to him. I think it was me who reached out to him. Just going, hey, don't listen to these people. It was good, and don't worry about it. And yeah, we met for coffee. He asked for a coffee meeting. He's up in Santa Monica, so it's not very far from here. He didn't ask me for anything. We were just talking about, his transition from being a videographer into being more of a composer. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought his approach was really interesting, offering his service as a video person, trying to transition into composition. But so we just stayed in touch over time, and his sample library demos kept popping up in my social media feed, and every single piece was getting better. And to the point where I think it was his demo for some string library. I don't remember what it was. I heard that demo and I was like, I have a movie coming up that I think he would be a good fit for. And incidentally, he reached out around the same time asking if he could just sit in with me and kind of watch me work and maybe do a little internship or something, because he also had another internship lined up. And so he was just asking if he could just look over my shoulder while I work. But it was the middle of the pandemic, so I was like, maybe now is not the right time to do that. But I have this movie coming up, so the best way to learn, I think you're ready to take over a cue or two, so why don't you try your hand at that, and then you can even get paid for it. You learn on the job, you get your first music credit. And he was game, and he did a fantastic job. He did way more cues than I had initially thought he would do. He was just that good, and then I just kept hiring him on a variety of projects. But he never asked me for work. It was just the stuff that he kept putting out, and we were just grabbing coffee, and the only thing he ever asked for was a sit-in just to watch me work, and I offered him work instead. Another person you may have seen in my making off videos is Lars Hempel. I've worked with him probably for the longest time. Him I met many, many years ago when I was giving a guest lecture at my old conservatory, and I gave everybody a mock-up task, and he did really well, and he interned here as well, and then it kind of grew from there. I would bring him onto smaller projects, and then, ultimately we would just start working together. So that was also just a very natural thing. He never asked me for anything. It was just kind of something. I was impressed with his production, and so I asked. Andres, my orchestrator, who you know from my videos, we went to UCLA together. We were friends before we were colleagues. So that's how that happened. And he's been working at Joanne Kane Music Service, honing his craft, working for, all the A-listers in town. So obviously I knew that he knew what he's doing. So it was a no-brainer once I had my own work to ask my friend, who's also incredibly experienced and incredibly skilled, more skilled and talented than I am, to be my orchestrator. And so, the list goes on. People were just recommended to me, or I saw their work online, and then, things just continued to happen, and I would reach out to them and ask them if they wanted to join the team. That's it. I don't think anyone on my team really asked me for a job or sent me like a formal application. I think all of them were hired based on something they put out that I heard, and then I was like, I should ask them to work with me. So it's a much more organic way to just put in the work, put yourself out there, and then let people find you. Rather than being person number 150 that week that is reaching out with a half-baked application, asking for work, because why should it be you and not the 149 other people? What specifically do you bring to the table? And I think the best way to show that is by just making things and putting them out there. I mean, it's never been easier to consistently produce content and publish it at no charge. I hope this was helpful. Again, you can buy me a coffee or a beer, and I'll see you in the next video. Like and subscribe.